Well, hello. I'm coming to you today from the children's playground out back, just trying to mix it up and make it interesting. I don't know. Hope that you're doing well at home, and maybe this brings a smile to your face or whatever. We love and miss you guys, and look forward to when we can be back together again. And so this morning, or today, my question for you is, when has fear kept you from being obedient to the Lord? When has fear kept you from being obedient to the Lord? I think about this phrase that we hear, 1 in a million chances, right? There's 1 in a million chances that could have happened. And I remember early in marriage when I was living in Bush, Alaska, and I don't even remember why I had a Sharpie, and I think it was dead, and it just needed thrown away, and I was laying on the couch one evening, and the trash can's probably a good 20 or 30 feet away over in the kitchen, and I'm just going to lob it over there towards the trash can, do my best to try to make it in. And this is back when surround sound still connected by wires. Nowadays you can get it wireless, but I just lobbed the Sharpie, and before I knew it, it had hooked on the wire running across my roof by the cap, by that little extra hook thing on the cap. I had hooked on that wire and was just dangling there. So we left it up for months just to, for fun, to remind us of that crazy moment of when I didn't even remember the wire was up there and just lobbed it and it just hooked. I probably couldn't have done that again if I tried. It's those 1 in a million chances. And that's kind of where we find Gideon in Judges chapter 7. You would remember from yesterday's reading that Gideon was called to lead an army against the Midianites who are attacking, and Gideon's afraid, and so he asks God to make the ground wet and leave a fleece dry, and that happens. And then he asks God to leave the fleece dry and make the ground wet, and that happens. And so here's these two crazy 1 in a million things, and then that's where we find ourselves in Judges 7. And today now he's got his army, and that's not enough. He has 32,000 people, 32,000 in his army, and God says, hey, ask anybody who's afraid and send them home. And so that happens, and they go down to 10,000. Again, just kind of a crazy circumstances to go down to 10,000. And then he says, God tells them that, well, that's still not low enough. So ask everyone to go get a drink of water from the river, from the stream. And then he narrows it down to 300 from that. There's 300 men who scoop up water and then lick out of it like a dog, and then the rest just put their mouth up against the river or the stream and drink out of it that way. And again, that's not what I would think of. Hey, if I'm going to narrow it down, let's just go with those that drink water like a dog, right? That's kind of a crazy story when we think about it. And so Gideon's down to this army of 300 men. And still God says, hey, look, if you're still fearful that I'm with you, go down into the Midianite camp tonight and I'll reveal to you that I'm with you. And so Gideon goes down with his servant. He sneaks into the Midianite camp, and we know from verses 12, that the Midianite camp, they're like locusts in abundance, and their camels are without number as sand on the seashore. And if you actually go to chapter 8, verse 10, we know that the total army had been around 135,000 men. 135,000. And so again, I think it's crazy that he sneaks down to this camp where there's 135,000 men, and he winds up next to these two. Let's read verses 13 and 14 in chapter 7. When Gideon came, behold, a man was telling a dream to his comrade. And he said, behold, I dreamed a dream. And behold, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian, and came to the tent and struck it so that it fell and turned it upside down so that the tent lay flat. And his comrade answered, this is no other than the sword of Gideon the son of Joash, a man of Israel. God has given into his hand Midian and all the camp. So again, he sneaks down, and what are the odds out of 135,000 that he winds up next to these two men? Right, a 1 in a million chance. So of course we know 1 in a million doesn't exist with God, that God is orchestrating and planning this all along, that he's putting this together with the fleece being dry and the ground wet, and then narrowing his army down to 300 men, and then going and hearing about a dream that this one guy has and what it means. And so he has his confidence to go and attack, and he God is with them and they destroy the Midianites, right? They all start attacking each other. And Gideon finds his courage. And we know that. We find that in chapter 8, Gideon is now with 300 men chasing the remaining 15,000 that are left. And that in itself is kind of a crazy picture. I picture a little Chihuahua dog chasing this big, huge Newfoundland or something, That's kind of what it is. 300 men chasing 15,000. No one would believe that. And yet this is where God has Gideon and the army and the way he defends Israel. And so the question today, again, that we go back to is, when has fear kept you from being obedient to the Lord? Just as we see from Gideon today, he was fearful and he needed all these affirmations, kind of these crazy ways that God worked to affirm him that he was with him. And when has fear kept us from being obedient to the Lord? And then even more specifically, what fear is keeping you from being obedient to him today? What has God been laying on your heart to do or challenging you with that you have been fearful about taking that step of faith, stepping out of your comfort zone? I challenge our youth all the time that when they're out of their comfort zone, that's when God works in big ways, in amazing ways. And so I know that, there's responsibility with our finances and balancing what God has blessed us with and given us with and not being irresponsible. But I think often we let fear step in the way of simple things of just having a conversation with someone that walks by us, that we just feel the prodding to just talk to them and we ignore it. Or the homeless guy in the corner to give them a loaf of bread and we ignore that prodding. Or someone who needs a ride, or I don't know all of what these things are. It doesn't have to be this big dramatic thing like we see here in Judges 7. But when has fear kept you from being obedient to the Lord? Again, I want to just finish with some song lyrics today. The song is specifically talking about looking down on ourselves because of fear, not seeing who God has made us to be. But the words still ring true with fear, keeping us from doing what God has called us to do, or from anything. And so, the verse just says, or the chorus says, "Fear, he is a liar. He will take your breath, stop you in your steps. Fear, he is a liar. He will rob your rest, steal your happiness, cast your fear in the fire, 'cause fear, he is a liar." And I know that song has been a truth that I've let ring in my mind of just fear. It's a liar. God is so much more powerful than our fears, especially when the Holy Spirit's at work in that and we know it. And I think you can all think of times in your life when you've had to trust God and take that step of faith. And I think we need to continue to do that and not become complacent. So I encourage you to do that today, to see what fears you've been holding back on or where you've been nervous or scared, and let God work through that, and to step out of your comfort zone and see him work and watch him work. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday. God bless.